I think Ann is going to be providing us with a message later on this year. I know I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for sharing. And then I'll mention, isn't it something we always say, thanks be to God, even when Jesus gives us these really, really hard teachings? I don't know. It's almost a joke in there. You risk the danger of hellfire. Thanks be to God. On the other hand, it can sometimes be challenging to live as Christians in today's world, can't it? Now, I'm not talking about what you hear some preachers say, that there are anti-Christian forces lurking behind every corner. I actually lived for 4 years in a country where open expression of Christian faith can land you in prison. So I tend to take very lightly those conspiracy theories. But I do find the values of our culture can so clearly oppose the teachings of Jesus. As Exhibit A, take a look at this.
Well, pole dancing as a workout is nothing new. Over the past few years, independent studios have popped up all over the country. But Kristen Kane is here tonight to explain a unique type of pole dancing class here in our area. Kristen.
Well, Melinda, I bet you've never heard of this one before, Pole Fitness for Jesus. And I know you're probably thinking, how on earth can you mix pole dancing with Jesus? Well, according to one studio up in Spring, you can definitely mix the two.
You're going to step in front with the inside leg. Now you are going to kick this one out. I was a dancer for 3 years.
Okay.
It's probably 7 years ago or so. I did it for a while. It was not something that I felt very rewarded with, but to each his own, and it was just something I didn't really want to do anymore. So I actually decided to take the part that I.
So, there, maybe you haven't heard of that in Newark, but this is actually becoming more popular. More and more churches, especially churches with a lot of programs, are offering these pole fitness classes where you can learn to be a pole artist. Does anyone remember Dana Carvey and the church lady? Yeah, as a church lady might say, well, isn't that special? Well, how did we get here? How is that okay? You know, the history of pole dancing is that it first began in circus tents, where men could spend extra money for tickets to see specialty acts, and women would dance provocatively around the pole in the middle of the tent that held up the tent. And what many people don't know is many circus performers were literally slaves. They were bought at a young age by circus owners so that they could display them in whatever way they chose. So it shouldn't surprise us that pole dancing moved into the other area where women were and still are enslaved in this country, the sex trade. Many pimps today literally own women who are promised work in other countries, including ours, and the women learn too late. They are forced to pay off these so-called transportation fees that might be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they can be beaten or mutilated or killed if they refuse to work in brothels and other places. And yet somehow this reality just doesn't matter to many people anymore. Each to each his own. We learned from the ex-pole dancer who says it was not very rewarding, but wishes to teach it to others. And so the British toy manufacturer Tesco now offers the peekaboo plastic stripper pole. This is true, complete with a tiny halter top for girls ages 7 and up, just in case you worry your daughter is too self-confident. How did we get here? In the Sermon on the Mount, 2,000 years ago, Jesus taught us, anyone who looks at a woman with lust in his heart is an adulterer. Note the contrast. Our culture wants to say stripper poles are fun, value-free ways to get fit, while Jesus says, do not look at a woman lustfully. Though slavery is illegal in this country, we are taught to ignore the connection between pole fitness and the sex slave trade. Though slavery was legal and women were property in Jesus' day, he taught his disciples to treat all women as precious children of God. In the Gospels, there is a consistent attempt by Jesus to raise up the value of all persons, to recast human life through God's eyes, to expose how precious each individual is to our loving parent in heaven. We notice Jesus saves his angriest words for those who degrade others, from religious leaders who would stop him from healing on the Sabbath to disciples who would bar children from approaching him. The preciousness of persons devalued in Israelite life is the common theme in this portion of the Sermon on the Mount. So we read that calling someone else a name, rakha in Hebrew, which means literally wooden head, is a form of dehumanization. So Jesus said God would lock name callers in a spiritual prison unless they reconciled with the other person, a process that requires we consider another's point of view. We remember Jesus said the faith of a Roman soldier, the centurion, was superlative in Matthew 8. Jesus appointed a tax collector, one of his apostles, in Mark 3, and asked God to forgive the very men who nailed him to the cross in Luke 34. Jesus saw the humanity in others, even those who opposed him. And Jesus teaches us we are to do the same. You may remember recently some politicians spoke against terrible things said about women by referencing their duties to their mothers and sisters, wives, and daughters. And they were loudly criticized by those in the opposing camp, saying they should just stand up for women in general. But I take issue with that, because those politicians were humanizing the situation. They were making the words said more real by relating it to our personal lives. And this is actually taught as an ethical approach to conflict resolution. If you do not know the people involved, then imagine people you care about in those roles of others. Imagine yourself in each different role. You know, there's something of Christ in that. This may not surprise us. Jesus humanizes the abstract. It makes sense, doesn't it? After all, the Bible tells us in John 1 that God became flesh and dwelt among us. Messianic Jews often describe God using excerpts from their Jewish prayers. And so God is shown in contrast against humanity. Creator, not created. Infinite, eternal, omnipresent. Yet this same God, our God, humanized God's self. Came to us so we can learn and grow, as the Apostle Paul explained in 1 Corinthians 3. Jesus is literally the humanization of God. Think about that. God is so utterly different from us, so alien to us. But God became flesh so we can follow suit, know and love others, those who share our humanity. And then we're showing they are priceless to us, just as we are priceless to God. Now, I know it will surprise you, but as a high schooler, I was a nerd. I wasn't known for bullying others, but I remember as a high school senior, we would sometimes haze some of the underclassmen. And one day I helped to steal and tie together and drape over a clock the shoes of a smaller boy. It was very funny to us because he was too short to reach what we could easily place up there. And he seemed so angry, threatening to kill us. "I'll kill you all," he said, as we walked away laughing. And I probably would have forgotten all about that incident if my mother hadn't asked me sometime later whether I knew a boy from high school and then named that same boy that we had hazed. And she explained that he and his siblings had been removed from their home because of abuse at the hands of their father. And the abuse was extreme. And suddenly, that day of supposedly harmless fun came back to me. And our targeting of that particular boy and his strong response made sense. And to this day, I feel guilty about that, because although I went to his next birthday party, and although I apologized for not always being nice in high school, nothing could take away the cruelty of piling one more indignity on top of a life of daily abuse. You see, my mother told me about his life, and he became real. He became human to me. If only I had kept his humanity before me from the start. So as we all try to walk in the ways of God and continue to draw near Christ, let us remember his teachings, hard as they are. Humans are not things to be objectified, as our culture can encourage us to unthinkingly do, but precious children of God. And not just those humans we easily like, but all humans, each person. As we approach situations and as we seek clarity in the midst of a culture that sometimes degrades people, God gives us direction. God says, imagine all those around us and all those far from us are people we love. Imagine we are those people. And then let us wait for a change in our perspective. For when that change comes, that is the very Spirit of God working in our hearts. Amen.